Today the world bombards us with questions like these. How's your social life? How's your business life? And even, how's your love life? A much more important question, though, is how's your prayer life? Today, Hugo McCord will be starting a new series of lessons on Lord, Teach Us to Pray. Stay tuned.
The Churches of Christ of the North Texas area present The Truth in Love.
How precious is the book divine, by inspiration given. Bright as a lamp His grace hath shine to guide my soul to heaven. Holy Bible, book divine, precious treasure thou art mine. Lamp to my feet and a light to my way, to guide me safely home. It sweetly cheers my drooping heart in this dark vale of tears. Light to my life it still imparts and quells my rising fears. Holy Bible, book divine, precious treasure thou art mine. Lamp to my feet and a light to my way, to guide me safely home.
Good morning and welcome to our program. I'm David Roper, evangelist with the Brown Trail Church of Christ that meets in Bedford in the northern part of Fort Worth. There are those men who are great teachers and preachers. There's a smaller number of men who are outstanding teachers and preachers, and also good men living what they teach and preach. And there's still a fewer number who are outstanding teachers and preachers and good men and extremely likable men you just enjoy being around. Our teacher for our lessons on prayer is such a man, Hugo McCord from the Oklahoma City area. We're so thankful he's agreed to do this series for us. Now, Mr. McCord will be with us for his first lesson right after this next song.
Soldiers of Christ, arise and put your armor on. Strong in the strength which God supplies. Strong in the strength which God supplies through His beloved Son. Strong in the Lord of hosts and in His mighty wrongs. Who in the strength of Jesus trusts. Who in the strength of Jesus trusts is more than conqueror. Stand then in His great might, with all His strength endued. But take to arm you for the fight. But take to arm you for the fight, the panoply of God. That having all things done and all your conflicts past, you may overcome through Christ alone. You may overcome through Christ alone and stand entire at last.
In Luke's Gospel, the 11th chapter, verse 1, there's a record of the disciples coming to Jesus and making a request. Lord, teach us to pray, as John also taught his disciples. Those disciples felt they needed help, and Jesus thought they did too. And you and I also feel the same way. But first, what a humbling thought and an exalted thought it is that a human being could get the listening ear of the God of the universe. And even more so, some human beings have the power of changing God's mind. Unbelievable is such a thought. And yet that's what the good book teaches. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. James 5:16. And you read about the patriarch Abraham. When he had loved ones in a city that was destined for destruction, did his best to save that city. God's penalty of judgment was coming to make the city an incinerator, to burn people alive. But Abraham prayed, Lord, if we can find 50 righteous people there, would you save it? Because Abraham was on praying terms with the God of the universe, God listened to him and said, yes, that I'll do. Abraham weakened somewhat and repeated his prayer. Now, Lord, if it just lacks 5 of being 50, would you reconsider? Again, the good side of the Lord was touched and the Lord agreed to it. Then prayer after prayer, Abraham reducing the number until finally it came to 10, but even that number couldn't be found. But this story in Genesis 18 shows us it is powerful prayer from a good man. And each of you today, if you're the kind of person in faith that Abraham was, you are on praying terms with that same God of the universe. But one of the things about which there is so much discussion is, are there any miraculous answers to prayer today? The Bible is clear that at one time, miracles did occur. In Mark 9, verse 29, one sees that the disciples were not able to exorcise a devil, were not able to cast out a demon. And they asked the Lord, why couldn't we do it? The Lord answered, this kind cometh not out except by prayer. Thus a miracle had to be performed to drive out the devil. But Jesus said it's by prayer. That is miraculous prayer. Then when one turns to Matthew 21:22, he reads such an encouraging statement. Whatsoever you shall ask in prayer, believing, you will receive. But beware. That verse is not for you and me today. In the New Testament, yes, but not for us. That statement is in the context again of miracles. Immediately before, the Lord had said that if you have this kind of faith, miraculous prayer, you can cast a mountain into the sea. Some have tried to say, well, that's just a figurative expression for doing a big thing. But no, he meant it literally, because we see just before that, he had caused a fig tree instantaneously to wither. Yes, nothing but a miracle. So in that context, there was a miracle by prayer, miraculous prayer. However, there are those that say today that since Jesus performed miracles by prayer, you and I today, through Jesus, can do the same thing because Jesus never changes. Hebrews 13:8, Jesus Christ the same, yesterday, today, and forever. Now it's true Jesus never changes, but He does change His laws. He had a law and a purpose for working miracles by prayer in the first century, but that time has long passed away. How do we know? First, we see why that miraculous power was given. When the first gospel preachers went out on the day of Pentecost and started their preaching, they didn't have a book called the New Testament that they could hold in a hand, from which they could read and direct people from earth to heaven. They were naked, as it were. They had to have miraculous power to back up their preaching word. And so Jesus knew they would need it and allowed miracles in that first century. Mark 16, verse 17, He said, these signs shall follow them that believe. In my name they shall cast out devils, shall speak with new tongues, shall take up serpents. If they drink any deadly thing, it shall not hurt them. And they shall lay their hands on the sick, and they shall recover. Then you read in that same chapter, at verse 20, they went forth and preached everywhere, the Lord confirming, substantiating, corroborating, backing up the word which they had preached. Thus the evidence for their preaching was the miraculous power that they had. Then you read in Hebrews, the 2nd chapter, at verse 4, how the Lord confirmed the preaching of the first apostles, being confirmed unto us by them that heard him, both by miracles and signs and divers wonders and gifts of the Holy Spirit according to his will. There was then in the first century a miraculous power given to those apostles, and by prayer they could even raise the dead. Now that power has long since passed away. It was foretold that it would cease. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 8, where there be prophecies, that is the ability to predict the future and to speak for God miraculously. Where there be prophecies, they shall fail. Not fail in their fulfillment, but men would lose the ability to prophesy. Where there be tongues, they shall fail. Where there be tongues, they shall cease. The ability to talk in a tongue that you haven't learned was going to stop, said the Apostle Paul. Well, Paul, what would last after the first century? He said, look at the last verse of 1 Corinthians 13, and you find exactly. And now abideth these four: faith, hope, love, and miracles. Oh no, I added a word there. It's not there. What is it, Paul? And now abideth these miraculous functions, on and on till Jesus comes the next time? Oh no. What does abide, Paul? After the tongues are gone, the miraculous prophesyings, and now abideth these three: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. Thus you and I live in an age when miracles have long ceased. They are gone. And because of that, you and I are not to expect miraculous answers to our prayers today. There is the story told in the last Galveston hurricane of a man who believed in miraculous prayer today, not just back in the first century, but in 1984. That's when he believed in it. And when that Galveston water began to rise around his house, after a while, he was in the second floor and couldn't get out. But the civil defense sent a canoe in order to rescue the gentleman. When they came to the second floor, they asked him to step out, get in the boat. Oh no, he said, I believe in miraculous prayer. God is going to save me. And he wouldn't get in the boat. Well, the boat left. The next day, the water was yet higher, and man was on the rooftop. Again, the boat went for him. Oh no, he said, I believe the Bible, and I believe in miraculous prayer. It's coming, a help from God by way of a miracle. I will not get in the boat. Well, they couldn't do anything about it and left. The third morning, he was on the chimney top, so all by himself. And they sent a helicopter to try to rescue him. Again, he refused. Well, the fellow was drowned. And the story is that when he appeared before St. Peter, he began to fuss and to complain. You didn't answer my prayer as you promised. Peter says, I don't understand it. Let me check the computer. And he checked the computer and found this man's name, and Peter was surprised. Sir, you don't belong here. Why? Well, the computer says that the Lord, in answer to your prayer, sent 2 canoes and a helicopter, and they're supposed to say, why are you here? You're not supposed to be dead. No, this is an extreme example of one who would think that miraculous praying is still possible for people today. No, it's all gone. The president of Oklahoma Christian College, James Baird, underwent heart surgery. And he was in a desperate condition after that operation. His heart stopped. But the surgeons applied an electric charger and revived his heart. Again, his heart stopped. Unbelievably, they did that 41 times, keeping that heart, reviving it, keeping him barely alive. Dr. Baird's friends, including his wife and his family, were downstairs in the chapel at the Baptist Hospital in Oklahoma City. They were having a prayer meeting, praying for him, and everything looked like he just couldn't be well at all. After a while, a friend dropped in. This friend was a heart specialist. He had heard that Dr. Baird was going to have surgery that day, and he decided just to drop by the hospital, see how he was doing. When he got there and found such a desperate situation, he himself went on in and looked at Dr. Baird's chart. He looked at it. He found the man lacks potassium. And when they began giving him potassium, he immediately began to revive. And Dr. Baird is living and well today. After this marvelous incident, there were students at Oklahoma Christians that said on the campus, this was a miracle. Here's a miracle in the 20th century. No, said Dr. Baird. He made a chapel talk to explain it. No miracle, but God worked through natural means to bring about the answer to the prayers of those people in the chapel. Yes, God's power is unlimited, and He is able to work through natural means to answer prayers today. But you and I are just deceiving ourselves if we are expecting a miracle. There is a statement in the 5th chapter of James that's quite interesting along this line, at verses 14 and 15. Is any sick among you? Let him pray. Do what else? Let him call the elders of the church, and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer of faith shall save the sick. The Lord shall raise him up, and if he've committed sins, they shall be forgiven him. Here certainly is something that is miraculous. There are religionists who have taken this passage and removed the word elders and substituted the word priests. Let them call the priests of the church without any authority from God's book at all, because God said call the elders. But that was back in the 1st century. And sometimes the apostles had laid hands on elders and had passed on to them that miraculous power. Not in every case, but sometimes that was so. And that evidently what James was talking about. Or some say, well, this wasn't a miracle because oil was applied, and oil was a medicine. Thus, this was a regular medicinal cure according to the laws of nature. No, one finds that sometimes oil was applied, Mark 6, verse 13, in the case of healing people, no matter what was wrong with them. It's true that oil was a medicine, and wine was a disinfectant, and the Good Samaritan, seeing the bloody body lying in the ditch, half dead, went over, poured in oil and wine. That was altogether natural, no miracle connected with it. But in this case, no miss if the elders put oil on a man and pray for him. Well, that was in the 1st century. Unfortunately, there's some today that think that is true yet now and have the doctrine of something extreme, the last rites to be performed. Today, they don't expect a miracle, and they don't expect the man to get up, but in order to anoint him just before he dies. But in the case that James is talking about, these elders couldn't miss. and there would be a raising up of the sick person. That was something miraculous in those days. Now, when you pass on to the next two verses, in fact, the next 3 or 4, you see he changes from miraculous prayer of the first century to that's ordinary prayer for all the ages that Christians are in this world. Confess your faults one to another and pray one for another. Wait a minute. James, shouldn't we call the elders? No, he's away from the miraculous now, those on whom hands have been laid. He's talking about every Christian. Man or woman, confess your faults one to another and pray one for another. For the prayer of a righteous man is effectual in its working. Does it take to be an elder? No. A special preacher? No. Any Christian. And the prayer of a godly lady who lives for the Lord is just as effective as the prayer of anybody else. And so that's what James is talking about in the second portion. Confess your faults one to another and pray one for another, that you may be healed. For the effectual fervent prayer of a right kind of a man, of a righteous man, availeth much in its working. Well, James, could you give us an example of something that's non-miraculous? Yes, he said. Read on. Elijah was a man of miracles. No, he doesn't say that. He was a man of miracles, but James is saying, I'm pointing out to you something now in Elijah's life when no miracle is connected with it. What is it, James? Elijah was a man of like passions as we are, just like us. And he prayed earnestly that it should not rain. It rained not on the earth for the space of 3 years and 6 months. He prayed again, the heaven gave rain, the earth brought forth its fruit. What do we have? The picture of answered prayer, God working through natural means to bring about what the man had prayed for. Where had the cloud come from that brought the rain when Elijah prayed for it? He sent his servant to the top of the mountain. He looked out over the Mediterranean Sea. After a while, he saw a small cloud forming, as small as a man's hand. He went back and told Elijah. He said, we'd better run, there's going to be a gully washer. The rain is coming. Well, that cloud got bigger and bigger, and then came into Palestine. The rain came in answer to Elijah's prayer, altogether working through God's natural laws. Now, if that cloud had come from the east, from Jordan, or Arabia, or Iraq, from the east, the desert country, it would have been a miracle, for clouds do not arise out there. But it came from the Mediterranean Sea, and thus that prayer was answered according to God's natural laws. How thankful we are for prayer, and God is listening. And one of the most beautiful statements in the Bible is in 3 John, the 2nd chapter. I pray that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospereth. What do we have? One Christian praying for another Christian. Miracle connected with it? Oh no. For what are you praying, John? He's talking about his friend, and he says, I'm praying for him. And there are 3 items in my prayer for my brother and friend. What are they, John? I pray that thou mayest prosper. Yes, I'm praying he'll have financial success, may have a raise in his salary, get along well in this world, prosper. I'm praying that. I pray that thou mayest prosper and be in health. Yes, I want my friend not only to have money in the bank, but I want him to be a man who's healthy, able to get around, use his body. He's asking God to answer that prayer. God can do it through his natural means. And third petition, that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospereth. He was assuming this good brother and friend was a good Christian, that his soul already was prospering, that that man was walking orderly before the Lord, doing everything that God wanted him to do. He assumed that to be true about him. And so he was saying, I pray that your soul continues to prosper. What a beautiful prayer. And that prayer is for all time. You and I can pray that prayer today and rejoice in its fulfillment if we're the right kind of people. But the eyes of the Lord over the righteous, and His ears open to their prayers. But the face of the Lord is against them that do evil. 1 Peter 3:12. They can't talk to God, He won't listen to them. Proverbs 28 verse 9. He that turneth away his ear from hearing the law, even his prayer shall be an abomination. Does God want him to talk? No, he can't talk to God. He's shut out. He's not the right kind of man. But if you and I are right, He'll listen.
Christ, we do all adore Thee, and we do praise Thee forever. Christ, we do all adore Thee, and we do praise Thee forever. For on the holy cross hast Thou the world from sin redeemed. Christ, we do all adore Thee, and we do praise Thee forever. Christ, we do all adore Thee.
Thanks for being with us today. Remember that you can get the special study notes on Mr. McCord's presentations by just writing and asking for the study notes on prayer. These will be sent free and without obligation. Our mailing address will be given in just a moment. Now, if you live in the Garland area, let me encourage you to visit the Church of Christ there that meets at 3630 Buckingham Road. Their Sunday morning service is at 10 a.m. Now, we hope you'll be back with us next week for the second lesson on prayer.
This has been The Truth in Love, sponsored by the Churches of Christ of the North Texas area. For a copy of today's program, additional information, or Bible correspondence course at no charge to you, please write The Truth in Love, Post Office Box 865, Hurst, Texas 76053. Once again, write The Truth in Love, Post Office Box 865, Hurst, Texas 76053. We invite you to attend the Church of Christ in your area. Join us again next Sunday at the same time for The Truth in Love.